But what we do on Sunday or Saturday or Friday, or before we eat or before we go to bed, or what we believe about happens after we die, we oftentimes don't share that with our colleagues. And I think if there are opportunities, if it makes sense in conversation, I think it's important to bring those things up because it creates a different level of intimacy, a different level of trust. Even if we don't agree on what we believe, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a gift. It's an opportunity for us to grow as coworkers, classmates, neighbors, strangers in the same city. I think it's a risk we should try to take.
Spirituality is our bench. What a funny title that is. What do you think the movie's gonna be about? I didn't really know either when I dreamt up this idea in the summer of 2013. But I knew I wanted to make a movie that explored why it was important to have personal, deep conversations about the stuff that motivates people: religion, philosophy, and spirituality. So I set out on a mission, and I gathered some friends together, and we decided we were going to teach the world about why it's important to have these conversations and try and get an idea of what we might be able to do to make people more comfortable with them. So we headed down to the streets of Philadelphia, and we wanted to get to the heart of the reason why people felt more comfortable with certain types of people than they did with others. First question is how you feel about expressing philosophical beliefs among family and friends.
For me, it's really easy. I grew up in an atheist family, so there's no kind of sense of very open discussions about things like that, philosophical and religious. So.
I guess it can be difficult, so sometimes I keep things to myself.
It depends on the family members you're talking to. I mean, I know there's certain family members just between us that, will feel a little more comfortable talking about it. But then there's others that, we'll keep our opinions somewhat to ourselves because they could be, they could have a much stronger opinion on their view, and it just creates, arguments sometimes.
Pretty good, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel any differently at the workplace or any other public setting that you would normally attend?
I wouldn't talk about spirituality at the workplace.
Okay. Any particular reason why?
Because, people have different belief systems, and I don't want to get into an argument with anyone or be drawn into an argument that people are rearing to have, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Again, it kind of depends. I mean, most of the time, like at work, I know I don't really talk a lot about, the philosophies or politics or anything, kind of like that that's more sensitive, unless it's friends, that I've, become more friends with than just coworkers. Once we're in more of a relaxed setting, usually if we're at lunch or something like that, we'll have those kind of conversations.
I work more in a social work field, so we kind of have the same views, but I still kind of keep it separate because I don't want to cause any conflicts or anything.
Yeah, that's a good one. I tend to be conservative in that respect. I don't like to, for me, to express what my beliefs are, being an atheist. And so I'm kind of sensitive to that, and I tend to hold back just because I don't want to. I feel like I might insult somebody if I say something that would be, they would agree with.
Is there any reason why you feel more comfortable around, your family, your friends?
Well, because I know them, I trust them, I trust that even if we don't agree about things, that, I sort of know what the outcome is going to be.
Okay.
We'll still be family and friends after the argument, whereas with coworkers, you never know.
Okay, thank you. That's all. So what did we find out? Well, we found out that generally people were more comfortable with family, friends, and relationships that have been close to them for most of their lives. But why is that? Why can't people break the same barriers down between religious or cultural divide with their workers than they can with their deep friends and family? One reason we found was trust, is that people trust their family and friends more than they do their workers, to not get angry at them or to somehow break off the relationship. But we found something much deeper, and that was that the people who said that they were more comfortable with their family knew that their family would still be their family and still love them. It was a much deeper trust that even if they didn't agree on the same things, that relationship would still be there. So the next step in our mission was to go to the experts, the people who know the different religions of the world by the back of their hand, the people who work in environments of not only diverse spirituality, but interactive spirituality, in which people of all different backgrounds were coming together to talk to each other, to converse, and to ask questions of each other. And this time, we wanted to see, do conversations about these topics really build trust between people? How can they strengthen relationships? And what context can we have them in?
What we do learn in a number of places is, first of all, that according to the biblical prophets, we are told that we are to be a light unto the nations, which means, of course, that we have to be among the nations in order to do that. So that's the first piece, where we know we are to interact with other nations, with other people.
But in the Christian tradition, there's a very strong emphasis on engagement and conversation, and an effort to present and to persuade and to convince people based on reasonable evidence and historical context and theology, in a way that people will be persuaded to not only see things a different way, perhaps, depending on what their way was before, but coming to a place of faith that is, and belief and trust that is different than what they would have might have had before.
One of the things that Judaism teaches, again, unlike some faiths, I have no need to save anyone's soul. We don't believe that we possess the sole truth. We possess a truth that works for us. But one of our sacred texts, the Talmud from roughly 2,000 years ago, says, for example, that the righteous of all peoples have a place in the world to come. So we interact on a very different playing field than other faith traditions might suggest about interfaith dialogue.
Yeah, I think if people are genuinely interested in hearing what other people have to say and not just stating their own view, then yeah, I think that does build trust, because it shows you care about people and, you know, what they think and how they've come to think what they think. So yeah.
And so, you know, our religion and our faith and our spirituality and the philosophies that guide our lives are among the most precious things to us. And to share that with another in conversation is a great risk. There's the risk of offending someone else, the risk of having it rejected, the risk of being different and weird. And by taking that risk, I think one, on a certain level, absolutely respects that and trusts that, even if they fundamentally disagree with it.
I think they absolutely build trust. Again, for me, it's let's come together to work on a project that's going to benefit the entire community, as opposed to let's sit down and talk. I think those are feel-good things for the moment that don't necessarily transcend the moment.
Some would say that the sharing of one's belief in an unhealthy way can violate trust, because one can do violence. It's one thing to share, it's another thing to impose.
Religion and spirituality are two different things. When I come here at formal worship times, I'm coming to be with my congregation. I'm coming to have a sense of connection with Jewish people across time and space. it's not necessarily my time where I feel I'm connecting with God. That time often comes more privately and can come at odd moments. So religion and spirituality to me are two different things. I hear people frequently say, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. I've never been quite sure what that meant. But I think that spirituality is more intimate. It's more personal. Conversations about spirituality make us feel a little bit more vulnerable than conversations about religion. When we talk about religion, we're often talking about institutions and not about people. That's safer ground for some people.
Mm-hmm. I think one can have a conversation about religion simply on an intellectual level as just something that's interesting to them. Mm-hmm. Religion is interesting to me in the same way science fiction is interesting to me, and history, cultural history is interesting to me. I love reading about other religions, but there's not a lot of personal sharing.
Religion is basically man's attempt to organize other people that share their belief in God. Mm-hmm. So how do we behave when we get together? What does our worship look like? How do we pray? Where do we pray? What's the right context? And kind of organizing that so people understand what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But personal faith, if they are within that tradition, their personal faith is going to be informed by their religion. Mm-hmm. So a religion that has statues, for instance, of their gods or their deities or their saints, if they see those images on a regular basis, that's going to shape the way they think about the deities. If they have an image of God as an old man with a beard, you might think of God as a grandfatherly figure. Personal faith is often very shaped by your religious context.
I think most people define spirituality as kind of the internal life lived, sometimes outside of formal institutions. So one can have a spiritual life one can have a spiritual experience looking at the sunset, or by observing dance, or by water. Surfers sometimes talk about spiritual experiences that they have. But I don't think it's just that. I think spirituality sometimes is the employ of one's religion. Mm. Their faith, their religion lived out.
What's the right context for people to have those kinds of conversations? I think a context where people have a level playing ground, a neutral place. I think it's great if you can have an arranged debate situation or discussion situation. That might be between 2 or 3 people or a crowd of people who want to speak together.
I think a space that allows for mutuality, and so if one is sort of being interviewed or surrounded with the intent of changing the mind, that's not real mutuality. It's not an even space. So I think there needs to be a level of safety, equality, mutuality, as well as a space without goal, which is sometimes difficult. I mean, I think if people are being honest and they're deeply committed to their religion, faith, spirituality, philosophy, and they think they're right, certainly on a certain level they want their interlocutor to convert. And I think that's important to name. And yet, in this conversation right now, in order for it to be safe, the goal shouldn't be convincing the other person, at least not in this first conversation, if we're just trying to learn and gain trust. The goal shouldn't be to convince you that what you're doing is wrong, what I believe and am doing is right. It should be to learn from one another.
Within our congregation, we like to encourage people to share their stories at a couple of times during the year. People are very open to hearing other people's stories. They want to learn about people. It's not just to say, you know, this is my name, this is my job, this is where I live. We want to hear what it is that motivates people religiously.
I think people need to have a little more courage in being vulnerable in where they are. That can be awkward, you know, at a cocktail party or whatever, just leading with what you learned about in church the other day, though people do that. And yet, there's something great about sharing that part of your life.
Well, I think for people to really engage on an interfaith conversation, we really have to acknowledge the differences in our faith and what's at the center of it. If we talk about religious structure, how religion should be shaped, or if we're talking about moral issues and how you should approach certain moral issues, you might have the debate, discussion could go on and on and on. But if you're talking about the core of the faith, the heart of the faith, some of them in some ways are so different that if it's not a matter of who's right and who's wrong, if it's more a matter of sort of education and learning from other people's sharing of their faith, it could be very interesting.
We work in partnership and support the work actually of Grace Lutheran Church just up the block. They're part of the Lancaster County Council of Churches meal program. And they asked us a number of years ago if we would help out. So twice a month we get together with them, and on Wednesdays we prepare and serve dinner to some of the poor and homeless in our community. To me, when we can speak out of our common values and act out of our common values, the conversations that develop while you're having a little free time between serving meals tends to be more substantive than just that raw academic conversation about what do you believe, what don't you believe. The outcome has been genuine friendships where people can talk about who they are, what they are, and even what makes them different. This is what motivates me as a Jew to want to help out the homeless. What motivates you? What's your connection to this? And that's where the conversations flourish.
We had all the necessary information, and we had consulted the right sources to really get to the heart of the value of people having conversations about religion, spirituality, and philosophy with each other. But we wanted to take it a step further and find a real-world example of people interacting in the ways that we have been exploring, people actually having those heart-to-heart, in-depth conversations about the issues that help them to wake up each day. So we contacted a local interfaith group, a group formed just so that these conversations could flourish. So after listening in to one of their meetings, we decided to pull each one aside and just ask them one simple question, and that was, why are you here? But we will let them tell their story.
It was because I came and I can lay down my guards, put down the shield that I have that insulated me, or a lot of faith people to insulate them from the fear of others' faith that can, being afraid for it to penetrate into them, and that will drive them away from their faith. And I found that actually that penetration is so fulfilling and so enriching. It just exposed me to another, it's almost, I felt like a child. All of a sudden I'm seeing a different world.
As I always say, we're not here to convince someone or to convince me of your religion or my religion, just to have a broader idea, to understand. And that's how you get to know that it's there is no need to argue too much about the differences. You know, there are differences, definitely, that's why we're here. but there is no point of arguing about it. It's much more beneficial to everyone to know what's in common and how we can connect on that common ground.
This group struck me as so emotionally real and spiritually profound that I sometimes would say, when somebody asked me, what's my faith, I'd say it's interfaith.
I'm more comfortable in diverse settings. This, I had hopes would be, and it is a very diverse setting, and I feel very much at home and comfortable in the group and with the people in the group.
We decided early on we were not a forum. So it wasn't comparing what Muhammad said to what Moses said to what Baha'u'llah said to what Jesus said. Although if we were sharing, we might say, well, Muhammad did say, or the Quran says, so there's a reference to our tradition and holy people and holy book. But it's more, well, like Amanda, I'm having a struggle in my relationship with my kids about faith. So no one says, well, Muhammad tells us to do this. It's we speak out of how our faith has shaped us at a personal level, as opposed to reporting it at a conceptual level.
So what did we learn? After doing all this, after wasting all this money, and after talking to people who probably really weren't comfortable with talking to us, what value did we get from this? What did we learn about spirituality? Well, for many people, it seems to be a meeting place. A place where even if people can't find similarities, they find a certain peace and a certain joy in talking to others about what invites them into the world each day. This is what motivates the people of the Devon Interfaith Group and people around the world who talk about their own beliefs. And we learn that we need a safe context and a worthy space to uphold these conversations. Spirituality, in a sense, invokes not only awe, but invokes deep relationships and connection. And it's not only a meeting place, but it can be the start of a new relationship. Maybe we need a metaphor to help get that across. Spirituality is our bench.
Pictures and